Joining me now, Congressman Adam Smith of Washington, the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee. Welcome back to Fox News Sunday, Congressman.
Well, thanks, Shannon. Good to be on.
So before we get to all the foreign policy, I want to note that you very quickly condemned what happened with Charlie Kirk, his assassination this week. Your thoughts today on where we go from here?
Well, look, I mean, the number one thing is we have to condemn this violence. I mean, yes, we need to have a debate about language and all that, but no matter what anyone says, violence is never an acceptable response to it. I think we need to really drive home that point, and I appreciated Speaker Johnson's words earlier on your program. I consider Mike to be a friend. We've worked together and will continue to do so, so that needs to be part of it as well. But violence is just completely unacceptable. Debates get passionate. People have strong feelings. That's part of the democratic process. But the notion that people think because they disagree with someone, violence is an acceptable response to it is one we have to stamp out in this country.
And it's been good to see, for the most part, bipartisan condemnation. And hopefully there will be ways to work together on some of the really difficult issues here in Washington in the months and the years ahead. First, there are several foreign policy issues the White House has got to worry about. The president traveling this week. Lucas hit on this post that the president had yesterday, directed at NATO, saying stop buying Russian oil. Also, he wants to ramp up tariffs on China. He said also in that posting, China has a strong control and even grip over Russia, and these powerful tariffs will break that grip. Now, NATO's been very responsive to the president's leadership. Do you think those two steps would actually make a difference with Putin at this point?
Well, I mean, the trade war with China is separate. China has been prepared for this war, a trade war, that is. I don't think tariffs on China are going to make a substantial difference in the conflict in Russia. Look, what we need is the president and the NATO allies and all of the partners supporting Ukraine to be united in their support for Ukraine. And the president needs to be clearer that Putin started this war. This is Russia's war in Ukraine. Russia has no legitimate security concerns that would cause them to invade Ukraine. They started this war. They need to end it. I think President Trump needs to be a lot clearer on that point, and then make it clear that we're going to support Ukraine. And then, yes, use more economic sanctions. Put pressure on Russia and Putin instead of putting all the pressure on Zelensky. I mean, President Trump literally rolled out the red carpet for Putin while he's been constantly critical of Zelensky. That sends the wrong message to Putin in Russia. I really agree with what Congressman Bacon had to say about where we need to go to get to an end of this conflict.
It does seem as if Russia is continuing to engage in very provocative, and when it comes to Ukraine, frankly, deadly behavior. Just yesterday, Romania says they believe a Russian drone came into their airspace, and this is after the incursion into Poland. Atlantic Council, they've got a writer who is their director of their Warsaw office, writes this: the Kremlin knew exactly what it was doing in reference to Poland, saying most Poles see clearly what this is about, not a declaration of war by Russia, but another attempt by the Kremlin to send a political signal that supporting Ukraine comes with a risk. Here's what Secretary Rubio said about our analysis of what happened in Poland.
There's no doubt about the drones were intentionally launched. The question is whether the drones were targeted to go into Poland specifically. If that's the case, that if the evidence leads us there, then obviously that would be a highly escalatory move.
Yeah, and our ambassador, acting ambassador to the UN, said that, quote, we will defend every inch of NATO territory. Do you worry the U.S. may get pulled into this with Russia's provocations into other NATO areas?
Well, there's several key points about this. First of all, from what I've seen, there's no question this was intentional. It was not an accident or a mistake. And then I think understand why Russia is doing it. Two reasons. One, you said, is they want to try to ramp up the cost for NATO and cause us to question whether or not Ukraine is worth supporting. But second, they're also trying to divide us. They're trying to spark this debate. Well, what do we do about it? How do we respond? And if one part of NATO says one thing, the other part of NATO says another thing, that divides us when the focus needs to be on defending Ukraine and supporting Ukraine. So I'm worried about that division weakening our resolve in that regard. But the final important point here is, even if this is intentional, Russia is not looking to go to war with Poland or Romania. They're just looking to poke and prod to try and divide us. So we have to be sure not to take that bait and stay united and stay focused on protecting and defending Ukraine.
Well, and, you know, when NATO gets pulled into it, obviously that triggers other concerns as well. The president's been clear there will be no U.S. troops on the ground when it comes to Ukraine, but there are these ongoing conversations about what security guarantees look like there in Ukraine. Are you concerned that we don't have more detail about how that should come together? I know we're discussing it with our European allies.
No, I'm not concerned about not having more detail. I'm concerned about President Trump not always being clear on the fact that he supports having security guarantees for Ukraine. You know, we have to be clear on that point. We can't show weakness. And it also didn't help when President Trump announced that we were going to pull back on the Baltic Security Initiative that I know, again, Congressman Bacon has been such a leader on, where we show that we are definitely going to support our NATO allies in the region. Showing weakness to Putin is not the path to peace.
Okay, I want to make sure we get to the Middle East, where Secretary Rubio is going to have conversations. We're told this was planned before Netanyahu did the strike on Qatar this trip already, but certainly that's going to be one of the primary conversations. The Wall Street Journal reports this. Officials in Israel and the U.S. have long been frustrated that leaders of Hamas, which the U.S. has designated as a terrorist group, are able to live openly and comfortably in Doha while their militant colleagues carry out bombings and other attacks in Israel. The fact is that there are other so-called terror leaders that live and reside comfortably in Qatar. So what about balancing the concerns that Israel has? Qatar's an ally of the U.S. as well. What should that conversation be?
It's really difficult to balance that, as you just described, but you're not balancing it by bombing Qatar, a nation that we have a very important relationship with, and has played an important role, not just in the Middle East conflict. Qatar has been central to negotiating the ends to conflicts in Africa and elsewhere. So I think this step by Israel definitely disrupts a lot of stability within the Middle East and is very problematic. Look, we've got to get to a ceasefire, and we've got to get to a reduction in the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. I support Israel, and I support what they've done to, weaken Hezbollah, weaken Hamas, weaken Iran, and ultimately part of the role they played in helping drive Assad out in Syria. All of that was positive, but now we have to have a path to peace. Every military commander I talk to, says there is no more military objectives that can be accomplished realistically in Gaza. The way to defeat Hamas now is to create an alternative to Hamas within the Palestinian people. And if the war continues, that just gets more and more difficult. So I think we need to get a ceasefire, we need to get humanitarian aid into Gaza, and we need to move forward with a peace plan. Israel's fought the war very effectively. Now they need to get to the point where they have a plan for peace and a plan for moving forward with greater stability in Gaza and also in the West Bank, where there is considerable conflict now as well.
And let's hope Secretary Rubio can forward that conversation to some progress and certainly to get the hostages out as well. Congressman,
Absolutely.
always appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Shannon.